All right, good evening, everyone. We
Good
are
evening.
live now tonight with special guest Charlie Price, and we're going to be talking about history legends, who I was not terribly impressed with on the Defense Politics Asia panel. Um, I think I might have finally lost my patience when he suggested that the Confederacy was assisted by the West in the Civil War. So I don't have high hopes for this video. I'm not going to lie. Anyway, how are you tonight, Hetman?
Doing well.
Charlie?
Oh, I'm doing so. My evening was just fine before you guys showed me this garbage video.
In
I
fairness,
know
I
I hate.
I can take the blame for choosing this one. The thing is I saw what drew me to this video particularly. I watch him mostly for his Ukraine updates actually, and kind of his differing perspective with it. And sometimes he is fairly uh I don't know how to put it. Sometimes I think he gets things right
Incompetent.
every once in a while, but not never. When he makes a video, he's competent on a few things, but never the whole picture. And with this, I guarantee you it's going to be the same thing, probably even less so. What got me to want to do this was actually the thumbnail that he used for the video, and it's it shows the thing colonialism, where there's like a British redcoat in perhaps southern Africa, and then it says myth with the British redcoat, and then reality where it shows an indigenous auxiliary soldier. I did some research. Well, I mean, I don't know. You probably, if you've been following our channel, you know that I have my master's in history, and I did research particularly on the Nazi occupation of Ukraine and the Soviet Union, and I likened it particularly through the I I looked at it through a colonial lens, and there are a lot of problems with the picture that he puts up. I want to watch it, and then comment on it as we go. I can definitely bring up those problems now, but it's better that we watch
Right.
this, point them out.
We'll
But
be
Oh yeah,
not
the thing
definitely.
is
playing that
that
particular way, but
picture,
yes.
specifically this
Although I just want to make one clarification. If you hear noise in the background, that's because the walls in my apartment are freaking thin, so my neighbors are really freaking loud. So if you hear noise in the background, that's not me.
Don't worry about it.
Fair.
Don't worry about
Yeah, we're gonna have to stop through the thing just to keep it moving. Uh, and I'm gonna not be able to see chat unless it's on my phone, so that'll be fun. Anyway, we're gonna get started on this because the sooner I suffer, the better.
Look at this face.
Oh god, is it cheating that like I watched like until the 12-minute mark just to get a sense of this video? Like it's
No,
so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. I couldn't stand the first 12 minutes. I was just like, "Oh yeah, this is perfect." You Hitman like picked the perfect material. It
L-
gave me an aneurysm. It's
anyway,
perfect.
let's begin.
That can't be
Of
good.
course.
The intern, you didn't pay. Statues of one means it's racism today. Hello my friends and welcome to History Legends. Today we'll be reacting to this video called How France's Colonial Past Explains Its Racism Today. No spoilers, it looks promising. Essentially, we're talking about woke activists that live in France, very important fact, that rewrite history because they're broke and they want your cash.
It's why there are growing calls for France to recognize and apologize for its
Stop.
violent colonization.
Already, not even like we're barely a minute in, he's poisoning the well. So before he actually addresses the arguments of the social justice activists, as he calls them, he already is tainting the well by saying they want to take your money. When these guys, when like no one is saying, let's take the French people's money. they're demanding reparations from the French government who have exploited and are still exploiting these countries. So I don't know why he. Oh, I know I have a sense of why he's doing it, but I'm just like, oh my god, anyone who have a brain would just shut off this video knowing that he's already coming in here with a dishonest framework.
I don't necessarily know if his audience has that idea off the top of
His
their heads.
audience certainly doesn't have that idea.
More to the point, like rhetoric is not. Those kinds of rhetorical tricks are really politically common if you're trying to make a political point, and they're very likely to. Let's just keep going.
Sorry.
No, it's
sorry.
fine.
This was the first issue.
Of millions of people in Africa and Asia.
What is that
Spain
map?
is still waiting for an apology for the 800
I think the map is a combination of like the old and new French empires.
As a matter of fact,
Is he comparing the Moors to European colonialism?
Yes.
Okay,
He thinks these things are remotely equivalent.
He's using a very sort of like in terms of the time period, a very broad brush. I mean,
that's at least
that's intentional.
At least, yes, that almost feels Islamophobic.
I don't know though. If I think he is doing what we're doing. We're doing a review of his review video.
Yes, let's not get terribly meta, but even so, the mechanisms of late European imperialism and the Islamic Empire are dramatically different. More to the point, for most of the Islamic Empire, you could simply exist as your previous religion, provided you pay a tax. It doesn't have this kind of overriding priority of this deculturalization. Like we talked about this in, I think, the first genocide episode of how these systems, European systems, create a quasi-cultural genocide that marks out this particular imperialism is very different from anything that came before it.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, there are brutalities and excesses that occur in the various Islamic empires, whether it be
sure
the first caliphate,
of course,
the Ottomans for sure, but even so, you have small little ethno-religious groups that have existed for years, largely because of those early empires. It's actually when you get into the later period, the 20th century, where they start to be under threat from the Islamic world. So, like, for example, one of my best friends right now, she's from a ethno-religious group in Iran called the Mandaeans. They're the last surviving Gnostic religion. And they survived. I mean, they call them actually, they're followers of John the Baptist. And theoretically, they might have originated actually. The theory is genetically they might have originated in the Jordan Valley. So it would have, it goes to show you how long some of these groups survived under Islamic rule. It's only now that they're fleeing as refugees. So, yeah. Anyway.
Mostly because.
Go ahead.
So, mostly because these countries are following branches of Islam, such as Wahhabism or some variation of therein, which expresses that there must be religious uniformity amongst the so-called pan-Islamic world, and that emerged as a response to what Arabs saw perceived as an attack from what they see as, and genuinely so, because they were doing it, European aggression and imperialism, because they saw liberalism and democracy as just like mass to the skies, like infidel behavior. And more to the point, you and I, Daedalus, actually talked about this earlier, and the difference is it's that he's conflating conquest with settler colonialism. Processes are not the same thing. The
Absolutely.
Moors never went, let's exterminate all the Christians. Most of Muslim Spain was still majority Christian all the
Yeah.
way to 1492.
How's Christianity doing in Spain now? Pretty good, all things
Pretty damn
considered.
good, all things considered. Exactly. Whilst in modern European imperialism, it seeks to destroy all forms of political and social communities, all forms of social relations, and then rebuilds them from the ground up to suit their interests.
Yes.
Africa, for instance, a lot of the things like the Rwandan genocide, for instance, they have their origins in how the Germans and Belgians reorganized these tribal societies into hierarchies predicated on skin color. They assumed that lighter skinned people in Rwanda as superior, so they called them Tutsis and rearranged them into say you are prettier and you because you have lighter skin, so you are the ruling class. You
Tutsis
are the
and
ruling caste.
yeah, the Tutsis and the Hutus existed before.
Oh yeah, they did, but it wasn't
Yeah.
an ethnic thing. It was more like a class thing because there were lighter brown people who were members affiliated with the Hutus. Yeah, that's how you pronounce it, Hutus.
Hutus,
But
as far as I know, I might have it actually mixed up. Were sedentary farmers, and the Tutsis for a long time were actually pastoral. Um, what the Europeans did and what they saw when they looked, because when they, when Rwanda was colonized, it's sort of you start to have the emergence of sort of racial science, and they looked at the skull shapes and like sort of facial features of Tutsis and thought, they prescribed a more like of a European appearance to them, and because of this, um, but it's a convenient way to divide people. Actually, all of it is about division and
divide and
dividing and
conquer.
conquering territories. You see this, of course, with every colonial European power, and you see it with particularly Nazi Germany, which I'll get to as this video goes on. But yeah, that's their modus operandi. The Moors didn't have that, mainly because at the time there wasn't really a conception of ethnicity at all. Actually, there wasn't at all. You don't have that until the 18th or 19th. I mean, really the 19th century, where you have that emerge. So the Moors, that's a time of where identity is one, local, and two, it is confessional. And if you have a large population you're ruling that is Christian, that the majority are, it's going to be very, very hard to force all of them, to forcibly convert all of them, especially then when you have swords, and you're kind of like, navigating rough topography. So you essentially just, you allow them to exist. For some of the nations like the Ottomans, you tax them. It doesn't mean that excesses don't occur. Actually, I would say some very bad ones do.
All right, Hetman.
Mm,
Hetman.
Go
We've
ahead.
now extended past the running time of the video. Let's move
Yeah,
on
let's
from
go.
the
Let's,
thing.
let's go. Yeah, yeah. I
Yes.
do run a little bit. So
Vienna could also
uh,
demand
focus.
apologies from Turkey for the Ottoman siege of Vienna not once, but twice. But do you see the Austrians ask for an apology? No, because the Turks would look at them and say, Vallahi
Stop,
kardeş,
stop,
Turkey army
stop.
number
I'm
one.
sorry. Wait, does he think the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Republic are the same entities? They're the same state because they have Turkish leaders?
No.
How can Austria ask for reparations from a country that doesn't exist anymore?
Yes.
That's
More. This kind of seems like the what if altist model of civilizational.
Ataturk has choice words for you. He has choice words for you.
Yes. Let's keep going.
It is. I can state though similarly, that for example, Ukrainians have often. I don't think that anyone's really particularly seeking reparations. I mean, now they definitely want it because of the invasion, but a lot of times
Ye-
Russia the Russian Federation as sort of
That's kind of a different item though, because the Russian Federation
topic.
can
It's a
hold.
different topic, but blaming the Russian Federation for the Holodomor is not. That's problematic as well.
Yeah, the Russian
Um,
Federation though will claim a direct lineage to the Soviet Union. For example, they have their
That
seat
is
on the
true.
United Nations.
Yeah,
Hey,
that is
yeah, but Turkey
But
outright
Turkey's not the
rejects
same.
association. They reject the association of the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
It's only until very recently that there have been Turkish nationalists who are trying to make this link, but that's a very new development.
Yeah, no.
And as Abdullah said, the Russian Federation explicitly says, no, we're the direct continuation of the USSR.
the USSR. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's why they have the Security Council.
All right, let's try to get to 2 minutes of video, shall we?
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, this guy's just so freaking
You can
stupid.
come anytime. If we come, Hali bye bye Austrian army.
Let's take a look at France's historic colonial crimes to understand the conversations on race happening today, and why the French elite say no when it comes to acknowledging its racist imperialist past.
In their ideology, colonialism is by default a crime. So when woke activists mention colonial crimes, they lose their minds. Same thing goes for
It's the same
racist.
image.
Wait, isn't that an image from like years and years ago? Like a
Yes,
set of
it's
footage?
from the 2016 election. It's from the 2016 election.
Yeah.
God damn it. Do these people have anything original? Can they not find new clips to use?
No,
Oh my god.
probably not. Hey, we got the
The
2
lack
minutes
of
and 3
originality is killing me.
Yeah, that's not even relevant to what's being said. So,
No,
are we supposed to draw a
it's not
direct
supposed
link
to be.
from American women who protested Donald Trump's election to French anti-colonial protesters as if they are ideologically aligned? By what ideology are they aligned?
These are people
That's
that
the
would
point. The point is
otherwise
to poison
not.
the well.
These are people
Yes.
who would otherwise not meet in any sort of social way. They're one, divided by an ocean. Two, I mean, not even part of the same milieu.
No, because you don't engage the actual arguments. Instead, what these types of people do is that they rather construct a caricature or a straw man and then say this is the representation. Everything I don't like. That's why I hate the term woke so much, is because it's so vague and broad that you can encompass almost everything in it. And this guy's like, how dare you criticize France for its actions? You are woke.
But
Like-
the problem is, I don't know if he necessarily has any kind of formal education. And we were talking about this yesterday, Charlie, is
Yeah.
that the whole point of a formal history education is not that it's going to teach you everything you need to know about history. It's going to teach you what you
This is
can't
true.
do with historical evidence. And it's going to teach you the proper way to construct arguments. So you don't necessarily know the whole breadth of human history, because obviously human history is
It's
gigantic.
impossible. That's
Right.
physically impossible. You would be
So-
dead before you could do that.
So
That's
you pick
multiple
you pick a
lifetimes.
specialization and you do your specialization, Holocaust studies, military history, etc., etc. But this kind of mode of analysis is incredibly surface level, because the Moors are similar to the French colonialism in Algeria, for example, or something like that. And that's not really the same thing outside of the fact that both of them were occupied for a period of time.
Both of them were conquered by different people. That's so broad and surface level that doesn't actually say anything. It
Yeah,
just says, "Look, Captain Obvious, that thing happened. Look."
It's the kind of analysis that gets you yelled at in a history class, in a low-level
Oh,
history
yeah.
class.
It does. I should know because I was yelled at for doing the exact same mistakes that
And
this guy did.
It's like we said, like everyone who does a history degree has that moment where they got absolutely swatted aside by a professor because they made a foolish assumption.
I've had those moments.
Exactly. Everyone has it. It's kind of the learning experience. It's what you were there to do.
But the deciding choice is: do you admit that you had a bad assumption and then you work to continue to improve yourself, or do you become
That's-
one of Altis and just drop out of college and say my feelings were hurt?
That's the point. Let's let him ramble for a little bit.
Sorry.
Imperialism. However, the golden rule is that it's only racist imperialism when a white country does it. Otherwise, it's chill. It's just part of a country's right to expand beyond its borders, and it's just part of history. Of course,
Who?
because
Who says
white
that?
people are
I want a
evil.
source.
For example, Malians take
Citation.
great
Hang on.
pride in the Mali Empire that grew through military conquest and
Citation,
subjugated
please.
all neighboring kingdoms, without even mentioning Mansa Musa and his thousands of slaves. And it's not until the arrival of the French troops in Mali that slavery and human sacrifices were abolished.
Let's start at the 17th century when the French colonized the Americas. North American colonies became known as New France.
If you're going to denounce French imperialism, at least do it with facts. Who is the intern you didn't pay to make this map? Not only
What was not factually accurate there? It is New France. I've seen the
Oh, it
maps.
is New France. Yeah.
I've seen the maps. So
It's not like,
so
yeah. I spent
like,
his knowledge of American history seems incredibly lacking.
Daedalus,
It-
do you
Yeah.
remember by where we used to live? There was an old French outpost, actually.
Well, the city of Joliet,
Of course.
Chicago,
my home
was a
city-
French fur trading post.
my
Oh.
home city was a French fur trading post. Like it used to be. It used to be a French fur trading post and an indigenous slave trading post as well. In my home state of Wisconsin, there actually used to be an indigenous slave trade that ran through here.
Oh, I
to
love
Quebec.
Wisconsin. A
Oh yeah,
beautiful
Wisconsin
place.
history. It is
Actually
a beautiful
not the
place.
southern part. The northern part's fantastic. The southern part's kind of a mess.
You know what? I live in the southern part, and so
I'm sorry.
you know what? I'm sorry.
Isn't the
I
southern
know.
part kind
I
of
know.
like hills and dairy farms?
Pretty much. And then there's like dotted civilization. Like it's just a wasteland of farms, and then civilization.
So, like, if you go through Wisconsin and you drive up to my family's place, way the hell up north, where we can launch water balloons into Canada. Not really, but you get the point. There's like a whole lot of national forests up in the north that are very pretty and very nice, and a lot of reservations and what have you. Not so in the south, which is kind of like Orland with trees.
But
that's really the best way to describe it.
But on this point that this guy's making when it comes to West Africa, he said that the French abolished human sacrifices and slavery. The human sacrifices thing is true. The French believed that that was against, the Christian ethos, and that you can't just sacrifice people who displease you or to try to get offerings from people. They didn't do it out of the kindness of their hearts. They just did it because it was culturally alien to them, not to justify human sacrifice.
No, but that's the point. It's not necessarily, and that's kind of the mode of operation is they go and impose their particular viewpoint, in this case Christianity, onto the people, and that comes with its own set of problems.
It does, even if it does lead to like this small benefit. And as for the slavery thing, that depends on how you define slavery, because whilst African slavery and how it existed was very different to chattel slavery in the New World, but African slavery is more along the lines similar to like in ancient Greece, where if you couldn't pay your debt, you could sell yourself and your labor to someone to make up for that debt. In most African societies, when someone is born from a slave, they are not slaves. They are born free.
There is the prospect, yes, there's a prospect of manumission. And that's one of the points that I kind of make, is there was a very unique, the Middle Passage and all of the triangle trade slavery carries with it is a somewhat unique view of why people are being enslaved and what the position of the enslaver and enslaved is. That's just wholly horrible, and not necessarily at first fueled by Christianity, but at least in the United States, close to the end, is wholly fueled by a view of this as being the will of God.
Even in New France, right? They still perpetuate slave labor, but instead of using the old chains, instead what they did is that they used corvette labor, where they would impress and draft local indigenous Africans in these areas to build infrastructure to facilitate the plunder of resources. And a lot of West Africans died as a result of these projects due to lack of proper hygiene, poor working conditions, just a general lack of concern or safety, and they were paid little to anything at all. And like, depending on who you ask, that is just another form of slavery, just dressed up nicely.
Yeah, let's see if he redeems himself. Probably not.
No.
Not only do I have to react to
Spoiler
this video,
alert,
I
he
have to
doesn't.
fix this video. So the French also settled in Guyana. They also had this region, Acadia, for a long time, as well as part of Newfoundland. And if I'm very picky, the French also controlled the island of Trinidad. Notice how almost all the Caribbean
Congratulations, you know
islands were
maths.
French at some point in time. There were as many
This is better
French
than
settlers
Moses.
in the Caribbean, roughly 54,000 people from France, as in all of North America from New Orleans to Acadia. And from a military perspective, it just makes sense because islands are much easier to defend than the huge swath of land of North America filled with hostile natives and
Stop. You don't colonize something because
blockaded.
you don't colonize something because it's defensible. Defensible is something that comes after the fact. You colonize something because you want the resources there.
Exactly.
So like the
Islands?
island, the fact that those islands all had plantations, massive plantations on them, where they could export goods at favorable rates to the countries that colonized them. They weren't colonized because they were defensible. More to the point, an island colony is actually much less defensible in a lot of ways because you have to permanently patrol the waters. You have to permanently keep troops stationed there in an adverse environment. If something does happen and the force is not sufficient, which is incredibly likely because you are sitting in a very isolated spot, you have quite some time, at least now, until you can get reinforcements. As a matter of fact, Haiti would be excellent proof of that. So, and just take a look at throughout much of it, like how much effort did the European powers have to expend in stripping piracy from those waters? Because they were hard to defend. Because it was easy to raid ships in that area.
So islands served the dual purpose. They were
English settlers.
fortresses, and they were economic centers and hubs for exchange.
It's not even
ship can-
it's not even an effective fortress. It's only an effective fortress if it's sufficiently garrisoned.
And most of the time they're not.
Yes.
Because they just don't have enough manpower to spread across that whole darn landmass, which is why they rely on local leaders to do much of the governing for them.
The one thing Daedalus pointed out too is that the conditions on these islands are not particularly ideal for garrisons at that time. They had them, but
There's a whole set of things.
Outside of the very large islands like Hispaniola and Cuba.
Guadalupe?
I don't think you could really keep a very large garrison on some of these Caribbean islands.
Yeah, you don't necessarily even have the resources. There's also the basic soldiering skills, keeping your feet dry, all that kind of stuff that is significantly harder in a tropical environment. So like imagine that at any time, like if you had a garrison of 50 men, imagine like a quarter of them are down at any given time.
Because of malaria or yellow fever or some other
something,
tropical
yes.
disease.
Even in the Second World War in the South Pacific, in the Solomon Islands, there was an incredibly high rate of casualties on the U.S. forces and Japanese forces due to tropical diseases, malaria, for example.
Yes.
So even that much.
I'd also like to point out, Alex, that you don't actually have to watch this video. You can go home and find something you're good at.
French colonized parts of the Caribbean. This included Saint-Domingue, present-day Haiti. It grew to be the richest sugar colony because of the labor of enslaved Africans.
No!
Very well. Where do I begin?
Saint-Domingue did not simply become rich because of slave labor. If slave labor alone was synonymous of wealth, why were African kingdoms at the time so poor? After all, they're the ones that gathered all these millions of slaves.
Yes, but that's downstream from the entire effect of why they were doing that in the first place. Because of that same cultural override we were talking about. More to the point.
And also their economic.
Like he's ignoring. He's kind of. I can see what the point he's trying to make, but he's kind of not going about it logically. Why are slaves being sent to a various place? Because they can be employed in the service of exploitation of a resource. So, yes, there's a resource there, and slavery is downstream from that. But that doesn't mean that the slave trade itself isn't highly profitable.
Well, yeah, but like in particular, it's just ridiculous because who does he think like built the infrastructure? When I went across this part, my head exploded because I'm like, who do you think built the plantations? Who do you think harvested the sugarcane? Why do you think 90% of the French monarchy's wealth came from this island? It was because there was a free labor force to do that, and the reason why like these countries in West Africa and Central Africa never became quote unquote wealthy, which the leaders did, the ordinary people didn't, but the leaders did. It was because it caused a brain drain. Because the slave trade was so profitable that it created incredible demand in these countries that caused them to frequently do raids and wars against each other just for the purpose of capturing slaves. And so they sold scholars, blacksmiths, artisans, people of a variety of like trades and educated backgrounds and sold them into slavery to make a quick buck and to acquire the manufactured goods of Europe. It's a feedback loop. It's a cycle. It's like a horrible like game where they all feedback loop. It's disgusting.
Yeah, like this is kind of just not understanding. This is not understanding how capitalism affects the, and not necessarily that it's strictly speaking capitalist at this point. This is pre-capitalism, but it doesn't expect
primitive accumulation, if we want to use a Marxian term. But like it's hard to develop a modern, sophisticated economy when most of your educated people are sold into slavery. I just thought that'd be common sense, but apparently this guy doesn't think that's common sense.
How much of the population is educated that they're doing it? I think also, he's comparing the structure of of these particular kingdoms and empires. He's comparing that economic structure to how,
to a European economic structure.
European powers, yeah.
He presumes that the European structure must be superior because one makes more money and is more quote unquote developed.
Right. That doesn't it's not a great mode of analysis for necessarily how they're functioning.
Because a lot of these African kingdoms function along more like a hybrid of like a caste and feudal system where there were like really delineated classes.
And there's a certain sense of communalism among classes too.
Yeah, definitely. Similar to like how in Europe there were like, there were in West African societies, there were like communal peasant communities that had a belief that this land was held in common and that they identified more with their particular community than they did with some overarching authority in some urban center like Timbuktu. They couldn't care.
Right.
You're also talking about a geographic, some of these of the West African empires, you're talking about an incredibly large geographic space.
Exactly, with a bunch of different political structures, cultures, ethnicities, beliefs, ways of viewing the world. I use West Africa as a general descriptor because I can't go into detail of every single one.
Of course, yeah, it's very difficult to do that.
I'm not a specialist in that field, but I know enough that I can confidently say that this guy is wrong.
Let's go find out how wrong.
That they had an almost infinite pool of slave labor. They could have kept them all and just become super rich. If slave labor was so profitable, why did they resort to selling millions of their African brothers to the Arabs and then to the Europeans? Truth is, Saint-Domingue was a capitalist wet dream. This colony that was not even an island but a small part of an island became the biggest producer of sugar in the world. But what made it?
And who worked that sugar plantation? I saw a great tweet from a neo-Confederate the other day talking about plantations, and this another historian I follow, was just like, what does he think? The plantation manifested itself out of nothing?
Well, yeah, who built the freaking infrastructure?
Yes.
Who built that? I wonder.
Coffee. Saint-Domingue produced half the coffee on the entire world market. This tiny bit of land, the size of New Jersey, was exporting more than the newly independent United States. According to the 1790 census, there were 700,000 slaves in the US out of a total of nearly 4 million inhabitants. At the same time, in Saint-Domingue, The census reported 400,000 slaves out of 500,000 inhabitants. With the less slave labor, Saint-Domingue managed to outperform.
That's not a great comparison.
That's not a great comparison.
That's taking apples and oranges. So the slave labor in the United States is producing things like tobacco. At 1790, it's pre-cotton. It's pre-cotton gin. It's producing things like tobacco and
Rice.
rice is still a bumper crop at that point. So you're going to see in a couple of years the cotton gin come out, and then you're going to see an explosion of importation of slavery to the United States. You're also going to see it easily eclipse economically, both in the North and the South, most of the Caribbean colonies.
And as much as it pains me to say it, how these two countries had like laws in respective to how they treat slaves were different. Not super different, but there were differences among them. And one of those is that in Haiti, there were so many slaves that came in through Haiti that slave masters thought it was more profitable just to let the old ones die and then just buy new ones.
Yes.
It was so brutal that at most a slave can only live there for like 6 to 8 months before they died. Whilst in America, slaves were treated more like a long-term investment strategy, which is fucked up to describe. I am describing human beings in economic terms, but this is just how slave masters at the time view it back then.
It's also this is like a really weird spot to be in, because you're sitting on the tail end of the Constitutional Convention. You're sitting in a period of time when the United States' economy is screwed because of the nature of the Articles of Confederation.
And the war debts they accumulated.
The war debts, the lack of a central authority to issue currency, all those sorts of things that cause economies to be kickstarted simply don't happen in the United States till they have a central government, a true central government.
This comparison is just not really fair, because all the circumstances makes this comparison basically.
Yeah, and you have
I won't say worthless. There's comparisons you can make between Haitian and American slavery for sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, the environment is different and the way they treat slaves. So like you see this, like slavery gets banned in 1809 in the United States, or the importation of slaves, excuse me, gets made illegal in 1809, and the population at that point, except for some black market trade, is largely self-sustaining. Whereas in the Caribbean, you have a system that consumes slaves.
Much so they just it's cheaper to just buy new ones rather than keep the old ones, because they're just gonna die anyway.
Yes.
That's the difference here, and I don't like this. This was a big indication to me that this guy has never done his homework on the differences of these slavery systems, because he just doesn't care. If I were to read any literature on the subject, he'd know that his comparison is completely stupid. But
let's continue. God, it's going to be a long night.
The main reason behind the economical success of the colony is that France massively invested to build infrastructure, mainly through
using slaves.
That paid for highly technological machinery that was brought and built on the island. There were roughly 7,000 factories and mills of all kinds.
Capital come from to build the infrastructure. Did France just materialize out of thin air?
On average, there was one factory every 2.5 football fields. And this over-exploitation of the land was multiplied by
processed sugarcane
workforce. In the end, there were thousands of ships coming in and out of the ports of
slaves, and even caused them to lose limbs.
What was on the ships, Alex? What was on the ships?
What was on the ships?
That's how you get the richest colony of the Americas.
The French also established trading settlements across the coast of India. In the middle of the 18th century, France and Britain got into colonial conflicts. Much of France's first empire was destroyed.
Add some freaking dates for the audience. First collapsed 1763 as a result of the 7 Years' War. How, you ask me?
That's a Hearts of Iron
meme.
You
can't really secure your colonies, especially when your nemesis is the Royal Navy, and as a result, the French lost all of its
have a true
colonies in North
analysis
America.
of history when you use Hearts of Iron 4 memes. That's how you know you're a true online history person. I felt dirty saying that. Only 4 memes. And then he's going to use Paradox game memes to prove definitively.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's keep.
And India, apart from little trading posts. France essentially sacrificed these huge colonies just to keep some of the Caribbean islands. Now, as you saw with Saint-Domingue, these remaining colonies
Because
were
those
still
made most of the
extremely
profit.
profitable, which made the British extremely jealous. And then round 2. So the second collapse happened in the years of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars.
Wait, what?
I'm not entirely. Well, there was broadly France was blockaded during this period of time for much of it. That kept them from reinforcing colonies. But it's not a collapse so much as Napoleon sold Louisiana to Thomas Jefferson for a stupid, cheap sum of money. Like, what was it? It wasn't that much money per acre. I gotta look it up.
Yeah, when I hear the second French
Empire right now.
I'm sorry. Price per acre. Here we go. 4 cents an acre.
Jeebus, that's practically free.
And there wasn't much that France could do after Trafalgar, anyway. That's all. Every
Haiti because of a slave uprising,
and Haiti, about really anything in the west this hemisphere. So I don't necessarily know if you can call that a collapse when he sold off the land for a considerable amount of money, and France maintained a considerable amount of power in that period too. Like, it's going to be the largest land power. Hey, Titan, it's going to be the largest land power on Europe till 1870.
The upheaval of the revolution knocked down the flourishing French Royal Navy, and the massive repression campaign
that
forced
first
90%
painting was
of the captains to flee abroad. The British took advantage of Napoleon's campaigns
I wonder why those officers fled.
Take over all the remaining French colonies. More often than not, with the help of French royalist plantation owners that also despised the Republic and its ideals of freedom.
But it didn't take long for French empire building to continue. France invaded Algeria in 1830.
Oh no! Come on! They make it seem as if the French were on some sort of colonial roid rage. Need to colonize. They don't even explain why in 1830 specifically. France even picked Algeria out of all the other places like Morocco, Tunisia, Libya.
That's not the purpose of
Bro, when does this game get fucking good?
What is he doing?
Long story short, during the years
he's just throwing memes at the wall and just saying, "Look, guys, I'm funny. Ha ha! Look at me, I'm so funny. Ha 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 ha! Look, don't pay attention to how my argument is really shit. Ha 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 ha!"
Let's let him go.
The Bay of Algiers supplied France with much needed grain. The government of the French Republic was broke and never really repaid him. Understandably, the Algerians were pissed. When Napoleon came to power, they kept harassing him to pay back. And in return, he was like, "You want to pay back? You'll get a payback." He prepared a very detailed amphibious landing on Algiers to solve his debt with cannonballs and bayonets. But in the end, he never launched the expedition. So now Napoleon was gone, the new French king comes in and pays Algiers half of the sum. But overall, the dispute continued because the payment was done 20 years late and half the cash was still missing. Then comes the opportunist King Charles X. He wanted to improve his approval rating among the French population. They were still alpha widowed because they compared every new king to Napoleon. So here's the situation in the late 1820s. Algiers was a vassal state of the Ottoman Empire. France supported the Greeks and were at war against the Ottoman Empire. So to further weaken their enemy, King Charles X essentially pulled out Napoleon's plan from the drawers. And then they came out with some bogus excuse, like the ships...
How does that make this better?
It doesn't. It really doesn't make this any better.
Like, how does this... Like that's quite literally colonial roid rage. You
not
are
only is
chopping
it-
off a tributary state. You are chopping off a tributary state of your enemy and taking it for your own. That's literally what is being discussed. That doesn't make
To
it
me-
better.
No, this would be like the equivalent if China went up to the United States and was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna conquer California because you guys didn't pay off your debt."
Yeah,
Wouldn't
no.
that be China going on a colonial roid rage? That is a colonial roid rage. I don't know why he thinks that by giving more context that somehow would absolve France.
Yeah,
It just makes France look worse.
it's like,
It makes it look
excuse me,
petty.
your troops are in my borders. Yes, but there's a very good reason.
Because we don't want to pay you. We
So
don't
we're
wanna
already
pay you.
sailing towards Algiers, and they're like, okay, let's find a good reason to attack them. In spring 1830, the French army disembarked 38,000 men, and 2 weeks later, they captured Algiers. Napoleon's plan was indeed perfect. The question was,
Why are we
what
swinging
now?
over
Local
Napoleon?
chieftains rebelled, so the French
he
army
didn't
went to
execute the
storm
invasion.
one rebel
Yes.
city after another, with a real
don't know.
objective of what they were planning to achieve.
And then colonized much of North Africa, West Africa, Equatorial Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, and islands in the Pacific.
Oh my god, I can't believe it. They actually used a modern map. Who is the intern that made the maps? All these countries did not exist back in the days. Anyway, I find it very
that makes
ironic
it
that
somewhat
they
better.
portray the French as
What?
some...
This territory. So that makes it better. That
Well, that's
okay,
kind
these
of
countries didn't-
the
that's-
point.
logic.
Those
That's kind
countries
of the
don't
point.
exist, and they were made in the wake of decolonization. And more to the
So
point,
this-
they delineate those old colonies and territories pretty well.
So wait a minute. When I see a map of the United States in colonial times, and it puts like modern like borders, and then it projects the colonial borders on top of the United States, does that mean the people who did the textbooks didn't know how to do the map making? Are they just stupid?
No, this is ridiculous. This is actually a ridiculous point of the argument.
It is.
He's not making the argument. He's not making the argument based on what the map is saying, because actually, I don't think the map is necessarily that bad for contextualizing the situation. It's certainly not a great map. Like, I would like it to have dates and whatnot, and I've talked pretty extensively on what maps should do in the past. But it's not the worst example of a map, and it adds enough
Worst.
context. But the argument he's trying to make,
Map.
yes, the argument he's trying to
Not the
make
best
is
example,
that they're wrong because their map is wrong. He hasn't really, like, in all of this so far, he hasn't actually made an argument against their argument so much as he's just sat there in his silly little voice and his silly little mustache and tried to pretend that their argument is irrelevant based on that alone.
And furthermore, I like how he doesn't. I like how he like doesn't mention like the sheer amount of people who died from France's conquest of Algeria. Just we just went in there and we just took over and we're suddenly kumbaya. Like 100,000 to 1 million people. 1/3 of Algeria's population was exterminated
Yeah, it's
because of this war. This is not.
It's not even getting into the struggle that they had to keep it and the amount of people they killed during that.
one of the seminal texts on
Listen, what you can keep
counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency exists because of the French occupation of Algeria.
Pretty much. I mean, like the sources are here. I mean, like I have some of them on here. In like the first 3 decades, the French military massacred between 500,000 to 1 million people out of approximately 3 million. That's not just like, how is that not colonial roid rage?
Gentlemen,
That is colonial
everyone,
roid rage.
I just gotta hold on. I gotta take a call real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. We're gonna keep moving for a hot second.
Some overpowered
fine.
military force that just came and just conquered Africa like that.
What the hell just happened? Hang on. Oh, Discord crashed. Hello.
Hello.
Hang on, my Discord crashed for some reason. Wrong one. Am I in my own room? I am in my own room. And I'm going to do this.
They can see your screen, by the way.
I know.
Okay, just making sure you know.
Right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Discord crashed. We're back.
Crashed.
I hate when this thing doesn't do this right.
It's fine. Stuff happens. Although by the way, Hetman, I would just like to politely correct you. It's she, her, not him, he.
I know. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just heard gentleman, and I was like, oh, he probably just forgot
I
or whatever.
corrected my. I'm sorry.
It's okay, man. I'm not beating you over it. I'm just like I'm like, oh, he probably just forgot about something. So I'm just politely correcting you.
I appreciate it.
I don't like making a big deal out of it.
All right. It's just another meme.
Why does he have Ben Wolfhard here?
Hold
I
on,
don't even know, like, his.
What the hell? Why is the Stranger kid here? Why is he here?
Yeah,
I
that's what I
left
was saying.
Discord for a second, and then there's this weirdo Wallace staring at me with his death stare.
Basically, what he does is just typical.
I actually haven't watched Stranger Things because I haven't turned Netflix back on.
It's great. It's a great show, but goddamn Netflix. Netflix is a bad company.
Well, then I will. When I figure out whose password I'm stealing.
Did we miss anything important?
No, I stopped it right away.
Good. Okay, thank you.
While ignoring all the rebellions and resistance to colonial authorities by African tribes and kingdoms. But who cares?
Yeah, why were they rebelling and resisting? Because, again, you put your troops in my land.
You put troops in my land, you're slaughtering my people, and you're extracting my resources. Why are you so mad at me, bro?
Like,
why are you so mad at me, bro?
What is this? What is
this? Is not colonial roid rage. This is colonial roid rage. Put your troops in my land, extract your resources, and exploit my people. Not colonial roid rage at all.
I can't believe he actually uttered that sentence.
About the truth. It simply slows us down from promoting our political agenda. Okay, do you want to trigger woke historians? Arwa, come here. They will never admit that in most cases the French conquered Africa with locally
By woke scholars, he means news historical scholarship, guys.
All the soldiers on the payroll of the Ottomans were now without a job. The French said, don't worry.
All right. It does not matter whose troops you use to do an imperialism. That's what?
Well, yeah, I remember this part. That's like saying, oh, the Nazis weren't so bad because they used like local collaborators to do their imperialism. That's fucking stupid. Of course there'd be collaborators that would work with them. If people could see a benefit with working with the oppressors, they'll do it. Because some people are just really
most
selfish.
It's not even that people are selfish. They will choose their most close.
Here is where I'm gonna come in and put my 2 cents. So, Charlie, you're absolutely right. First of all, but so I did a research project, a conference presentation on the Ukrainian, I mean, it's a rather broad term, but Ukrainian auxiliary police. And I compared them to a Nazi version of the force publique. I don't know if that term rings a bell. The force publique were the auxiliary force used to enforce Belgian colonialism in the rubber trade in
the Congo.
Yeah, and these people, my argument is that both them and some people might take issue with it because, of course, both the force publique and both the auxiliary police were responsible for absolutely horrible crimes, but they themselves are a victim of the colonial system. And you see examples, for example, the head of the so I'm trying to see maybe if I can pull up. I'm not going to pull it up, but Out of, I think it was maybe 45 individuals that whose case files I used for my master's thesis, at least 12 of them, and you got to keep in mind that this is a rather small area that I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on the equivalent of a county in Ukraine. Out of this group of, indigenous, either police or administrative functionaries, at least a quarter of them wind up becoming victims themselves of the German system. Some, like the chief of the police of the city that I did, was executed by the Germans. He actually met a very fitting end, in my opinion, but he was responsible for some really horrible atrocities. But that's the thing, is that these people, these they're using locals to enforce uh their rule over the land, but that doesn't make, you know for example, because locals are committing violence or compelled to commit violence or persuaded to do so, usually sometimes, it's through financial incentive, sometimes it's through actually preserving their own lives, sometimes it's through masking their identities. There's
Oh yeah,
it's
well,
just a wide
definitely.
gamut. Yeah,
I mean, look.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, to help, like, to support your analysis, like how like the Nazis employed, quote unquote, a lot of former Soviet troops into Russian far right paramilitary groups as a form of, like, to serve as local collaborators to help them. And most of these guys didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. They were
They didn't
forced
have a choice. It was either that or starve
or
to death.
die.
Yeah, or
So,
die,
like,
or be
like
killed by labor, be gassed in a
like what choice did they have? And then when they were captured by the Soviet Union, they were executed as traitors. So it was a lose-lose for them at the end. I should specify that when I say, like, not, of course, not every collaborator who works with the colonial powers is a selfish prick. They exist, but they're not the majority. Most people, I agree with you, generally collaborate with these powers out of either a financial incentive or because they genuinely want to survive and they just don't see any other option available. And I would tell people that if you were in their shoes, would you not make the same decisions, or at least, like, not give it a second thought?
Of
If
course,
you were
when
in the,
you're faced with starvation, for example, there's one individual in my case study who, um, the local, so he was he was, worked, basically from a poor peasant background. He worked on a collective farm. When the Germans took over Ukraine, they didn't get rid of the collective farms. They, relabeled it. And he, the administrator that the Germans put there, was a local who had beef with this person. That person, when they were doing roundups of people to deport for Germany, to slave labor, um, this person was given the opportunity, okay, not by the administrator, but he said, I could either join the police or be deported. Both his parents were elderly and immobile. They were incapable of doing work themselves. So if he hadn't joined the local police, and this was actually all well after the Holocaust was committed in this region, the Shoah was committed in this region. Even so, he was still implicated in several crimes just as being part of the police. But he did that essentially to save his parents. And his story is rather tragic, of course, because he ends up being, once the Soviets returned, persecuted by them and sent to hard labor, to
All
gulag,
right.
to slave labor. So
and like, to go back to the Algeria, don't worry, Dallas, this will be short. But since he's talking about Algeria, a lot of these Algerian collaborators are nomadic and pastoral tribesmen who joined the French because they saw the extreme brutality of extermination that the French employed. They were like,
Yeah, if you
"Oh
can't beat
no,
them, join them.
If you can't beat them, join them, because they saw what happens to tribes and cities who revolt. They get exterminated off the face of the earth. Like, the French did crap that the Mongols would blush at. That's how brutal this conquest was. So many of them were like, join them rather than didn't die.
In fairness to the Mongols, if Genghis Khan had thought of it, he probably would have done it.
We'll pay you and you'll fight for us now. And that's how the French army incorporated multiple regiments of Spahi cavalrymen, as well as battalions of locally recruited light infantry, mainly from the Zuawa tribe, which would eventually become the famous Zouaves. Who do you
They
think
held many
marched
family
through
members of that
Africa
tribe
raising
hostage
this
to ensure
blue, white,
cooperation.
red banner? For the most part, regiments of West African infantrymen. Even more controversial, it has to stay between you and me. It happened countless times that local African chieftains called the French army for help against one of their rivals. That's literally History 101. For example, in the 1870s, a chieftain called...
And
It's not History 101, first of all. I'm absolutely convinced that you've never attended a History 101 class.
That's what I was just gonna say.
what?
Samori Touré
Look at his
was
logic
rapidly
here.
expanding
It's
his
just
kingdom
really...
in West Africa.
Stop it.
Here's the trouble. Here's the trouble. You said he thinks he's a military historian. I am a military historian. I don't think he is.
No, he's not.
I think if I said Jomini, he'd be like, "Is that a type of coffee?"
Oh, why me?
Clausewitz, is that some kind of gift giver on Christmas?
I'm sure he knows Clausewitz, but you
Yeah,
know,
Clausewitz people probably know.
yeah.
Oh.
When
Alfred Thurmanon? What?
when Scott Ritter mentioned a particular monograph, expecting him to know it, he was like, "Yeah, I heard of it."
Well, it's fair not to. It's again, history is a
I mean,
huge
Scott
topic.
Ritter, that's a whole different issue, but like at least Scott Ritter knows historiographies.
Sure,
not
Scott Ritter knows
well,
historiographies, but
he's a wacko, but he at least knows it. I mean, History Legends doesn't.
Scott
He's
Ritter
a
is
guy who literally has an interest in history.
yeah.
There's a
Scott Ritter
difference
has
between,
a
and,
couple
like,
fries short of a Happy Meal.
of course, he doesn't have any sort of training as a historian whatsoever.
Yes.
His army dominated the battlefield using modern weaponry bought from the British. This is when the people of Côte d'Ivoire refused to convert to Islam and did not want to send any more of their people as slaves to pay tribute. Without a proper army, they quickly asked the French army for help. And the conquest of West Africa was completed by General Alfred Dodds. Both of his parents were light-skins, mixed French and Senegalese. Alright,
matters how.
enough with the facts.
That doesn't.
That matters how.
What does the fact change? Like,
There were
so French people came and had sex with African people, and that made it all okay.
yeah.
And American settlers raped indigenous women and black women. I guess that made it okay because they produced mixed race babies. Like, what the hell are you saying?
And
Let's keep going.
also,
Let's continue.
no, like even some of the for example, like in Louisiana, the those who are of mixed black and white heritage, many of them, they formed a class unto themselves, and many of them owned slaves. But how does that make it?
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily make
How
it
does one
better.
supplant the other? How does one make the other right? Or like, they did this too. How does that prove your point? It doesn't.
It doesn't. It actually makes it worse.
That the system isn't.
Well, it's evidence of this discussion that we were having that the European colonialism overrides these relationships, and it creates new relationships that serve the colonial powers. It is to my benefit as a colonizing power to have the locals fighting each other. It's also my benefit to pick a side.
It's also your benefit, even if it's not necessarily something that is. I don't believe it's something that's pre-planned necessarily, but it's also your benefit, to your benefit, if you create a new class or new group of people within those societies. Look at, for
Hey, Obscurus.
example, the impact that it has had on South America, Central America to this day. You know, you have a whole, probably the largest group of the population, which are mestizo, which are mixed
Yeah.
ancestry. So you have a lasting impact from that, from these.
I also think it just goes to also display to like just how intoxicating and how effective the political strategy of whiteness is as a social category, because whiteness as a social construct is so broad and vague that it can even incorporate lighter brown skinned people, and it says that
Conditionally.
conditionally there are conditions tied to white supremacy. I am aware, conditionally, but only if you serve the colonial regimes do you be considered white or white passing enough for us to deem you as rulers of this local area. And that's
Yes.
intoxicating. and,
Is
and they would use this shit to justify their imperialism.
More to
Again, going back
more to the
that.
point, people
go ahead.
are going to engage with their circumstances. So if they're in a spot where they can be elevated by complying, particularly if they see what the penalty is for not complying, they're going to do it. It's just like divide and conquer works very well for a reason.
Empire building led to huge financial gain. Its global settlements provided a network of trading posts and colonies that were hugely profitable for private investors. In West Africa alone, the gains from colonialism exceeded 3.2 billion francs in 1914.
Typical woke tactics by throwing random numbers that have absolutely no meaning. What does 3.2 billion francs from 1914 even mean? And just to
It means they had 3 billion francs in 1914.
portray how
3 billion more than they couldn't have
researched
made
this
without
video
colonialism.
really is. I found this 3.2 billion figure, and it actually comes from an opinion piece written by author Elise Ruery, where she writes, I quote, "Colonization of French West Africa was profitable for France, to the extent that the impact on cumulative domestic production exceeded 3.2 billion 1914 francs." But what this YouTube video did not understand
In West Africa alone, the gains from colonialism exceeded 3.2 billion francs in 1914.
is that Elise Ruery meant the cost of colonization of West Africa for French taxpayers amounted to 3.2 billion francs. It's clearly written in Table 1 and has nothing to do.
I'm looking here. That's not.
Average share of metropolis expenditure. Metropolis is just another fancy term for like home country.
Yeah.
Expenditure percentage points. I'm just saying that for the folks at home. Number
with
of
the benefits
years.
extracted from colonization.
I don't think this says what he
clearly
thinks he
shows how they're
says.
ready to
Come on.
manipulate numbers just to promote their political agenda.
Where would France be without its colonies, its possession in the Caribbean? Where would France be without its huge possessions in sub-Saharan Africa? Where would France be without its
In the
possession?
same place it is now.
Let's talk about 1914 particularly, because there's a point to be made here that he should recognize, and if he's a real historian. In 1914, World War I breaks out. The French army rapidly exceeds its population capacities for warfare. It does not function without its colonial powers feeding it men and equipment.
Especially in like a total war situation, like
So
World War I.
you have this case where the French army is demographically exhausted by 1917 and doesn't break, like that. France doesn't experience a similar collapse that Russia does, is mostly due to the fact that the French army revolts and refuses to attack any further. Like they see huge benefits from having these overseas colonies in wartime. It turns into a lifeline for France in a lot of very important ways. It gives them naval bases that they can readily work around the Germans. It gives them near total supremacy in the world outside the United Kingdom and France, outside of the European continent, because they have so effectively isolated the German colonies.
And then of course there's the, like as you mentioned, like the equipment, but the equipment had to be manufactured, and a lot of those manufacturing materials came from
Those outside
mineral-
colonies.
Yeah, from outside colonies. And you know who else said that? The leaders of France themselves.
Yes.
Like there are these
in Asia
quotes.
without Algeria.
Say
And that's a
this.
question that is extremely important when we go back. And I'm just talking about the economy, right?
Probably wealthier. I mean,
No, that's not the case. Why would they have done this at all in the first place if they were not going to see an economic advantage from it?
Wait, you were saying
Exactly.
they would have been wealthier without their overseas colonies?
Like,
He thinks that, yes, he does.
Is-
but he's
is
just
this-
wrong.
is this white man's burden or something? I don't understand this line of reasoning. It's not historically valid.
No, he's not historically
look at
valid. He's just
Japan,
wrong.
Brazil, China, India, the United States that had no African colonies. And look at them now, they're the richest countries on earth.
By the
China has a form of colonial control over African countries using banking loans that is significantly more insidious, I think, than anything that was done previously. And the
What were the
United
other
States
countries
does
you
the same
mentioned?
things. Japan engaged in colonialism as soon as they could get away with it. Very similar to Europe as well in brutality and scope.
Did he mention Brazil?
Yes.
From the aspect
Oh,
of
which was built off the genocide of indigenous people by the
I was just gonna
Portuguese and the
say,
enslavement of black people
Yes.
until 1888. Brilliant example. Totally
Wait,
didn't help.
It's
Brazil's
like
growth.
he thinks these countries have manifested themselves. Also, the United States is arguably an empire with overseas holdings and territories.
of
Uh,
course.
d-
military bases in over a dozen countries and like multiple alliances with different countries to like do blah blah blah. It's like
so it's not really. Yeah, the United States also maintains an effective hegemony over economic interests.
doing a
Using
lot of all this. He's like, well, Germany didn't benefit from slavery, so it must have not been a real thing for industrialization.
the way, France forced Haiti, one of the world's poorest countries, to pay the equivalent of $21 billion in reparations for freeing itself from French colonialism and slavery.
Haiti, not to be confused with Tahiti. Yes, we're talking about islands in both cases, but completely different vibes. So remember, the French had built a lot of infrastructure in Saint-Domingue, and the independence of what is now Haiti meant that all the properties and investments of plantation owners were lost. Now, these people that invested in the colonies were so powerful that they pressured the new French king for a new expedition against Haiti in 1816 to suppress these Haitian rebels once and for all. At the same time, Haiti was broke. Nobody recognized independence. Nobody wanted to trade with them.
I'm not sure that's
And the cherry
true.
on top, former slaves.
Well, he's actually partially true. The reason why Haiti was so poor, it was a confluence of the fact that after in 1804 to 1806, the new Haitian government declared that all French whites were to be systematically executed, and that alienated them across a lot of the more developed countries, especially the United States and Great Britain, that Haiti depended on for trade. And so when they issued embargoes on Haiti, it absolutely crippled their economy. And then on top of that, France impeded upon them millions upon millions of dollars of like war debt upon them, which further impeded their economy. And then to add on top of that crap show, you have a new class of elites.
Yeah.
You have a new class of elites of like mixed race people who took the place of the white, like big whites, as the new plantation owners, and just converted the slaves into forced labor again or through coerced labor. Exactly, you're not in chains anymore, but you don't really have much of a choice but to work in the plantations because that's all you know. Like,
yeah, it was 1862 when the United States recognized Haiti, mostly as a middle finger to the Confederacy.
Rejected any kind of authority and certainly did not want to go back to work in the plantations. In 1825, Haiti accepted to
I
pay
wonder
indemnity
why.
to former plantation owners in exchange for this recognition of independence. France asked for 150 million francs, which was equal to only 1 full year of revenue generated by Saint-Domingue. At its peak, of course. However, negotiations were dragging on for so long that Charles X
Wait.
got fed up.
Wait, Is he saying that, oh, if Haiti could have easily paid that off, were they just lazy?
No, I don't think that's what he's saying, but he's also not making any kind of point that invalidates his position. That it validates his position.
Well, the reason why I say that is because he
the
says
same.
they put in debt of like 150 million francs, which he said was like, which is what Saint Domingue made in 1 year at the peak of their slave trade. And he's not mentioning the fact that Haiti had just gone through a multi-decade long war, multiple invasions, embargoes, etc. And he just thinks that like what they should.
You're missing,
Oh.
Charlie, too, is that they invaded and occupied the Dominican Republic, or the territory of the Spanish Española, and that too. I think that they actually occupied it for several years, and that campaign also contributed to their economic downturn as well. So it's all of this.
This is
Yeah.
what happens when you simplify history down to just simple look at the woke people.
As for Algeria.
Go. Finish quickly.
Sorry. He doesn't seem to actually have any valid argument whatsoever. He just sort of uses whataboutisms.
Yeah, it's more to the point like, yeah, Haiti was a colony. Not really. Yes, it was. You just spent the entire time explaining. Algeria wasn't a colony. Yes, it was. You just spent the entire time explaining how it was colonized. All you've really done at this point is you've not really debunked anything so much as you have added to it, which I can applaud in a certain sense. But you're trying to argue that the context that you're providing changes the underlying point, but you're not demonstrating that.
And we know what he did next. He sent an armada of 14 warships to blockade all ports and bully Haiti into signing the agreement. Charles X was the ultimate mafia boss. If you owe him money, you're in trouble. But if he owes you money, you're in deep shit.
The French Revolution proclaimed universalist principles, freedom and rights for all men. That was meant to lead to suffrage for adult males and the abolition of slavery in mainland France. Slavery was actually reinstated before it was banned again.
Okay. This one is tricky. In 1789, French revolutionaries declared all men are born and remain free and equal in rights. So then all the slaves were happy. They came up to plantation owners and were like, "What's up, homie? We're finally free. Those are my rates."
Who's saying this? He didn't say this.
Great.
What is...
He's just straw manning again and again and again. Saying shit the video did not say.
His crack pipe is hot to the touch.
I need a crack pipe for this shit. Oh my god.
Slavery was only abolished 5 years later in 1794. However, business is business. By doing so, French plantation owners preferred to continue the slave trade, but under British rule. So to seduce them again, Napoleon reinstated slavery in 1802, but the damage had already been done. In the end, France would re-abolish slavery in 1848, just to milk this thing a little bit more.
Jules Ferry was a French statesman and leading promoter of colonial expansion. In 1884, he said, "The higher races have a right over the lower races. They have a duty to civilize the inferior races."
I mean, I know it's picky, but I have to add minutes to the video. He actually said this in 1885 and not in 1884. And as a matter of fact, this was the mainstream ideology of the universalist French left at the
This is not making it better.
time. But in response to this quote, conservatives like French politician Georges Clemenceau said, "I heard that some German scientists proved scientifically that French people were an inferior race to Germans because France lost to Germany in 1870. Since then, I watch with a careful eye anyone talking about inferior races." So essentially, French colonization was thought by the left and achieved by the conservatives.
Colonialism was spun as mission.
That's not even remotely a...
I'm confused. What's the point?
Yes, he's trying to pass it off to being a woke thing.
So
there's also this is the Democrats were the original slaveholders argument just made for France.
This is just the Democratic plantation argument.
The civilizing mission.
one of the corners of French imperialism was the idea that France was the country of the Enlightenment. So it was really a huge part of the French brand of colonialism, colonizing to, almost this divine mission to take people out of the darkness and bring them into civilization. But the civilizing mission was just the self-aggrandizing and the prestige that France got from having the second biggest empire in the world.
That's the entire problem of doing historical shortcuts. Truth is, by the 1870s, Africa was for grabs. Europe had both a
Why was it up for grabs?
What is he talking about shortcuts? This entire video has been a shortcut. Like, you still haven't made the argument about, like, their argument is fundamentally that Africa being up for grabs was wrong, and he's not saying why it isn't. He's just saying that it is.
It's a common tactic anti-SJWs like to use a lot. The more you see it, the more you notice it. Where like they don't actually disagree, but they just keep
Like,
saying
it's
stuff.
it's not actually an argument. He just says a thing and then pretends that it's self-evident.
Exactly, without actually doing any real work to back it up.
numerical advantage. There were more people in France than all of its future West African colonies. And it's possible that the French government believed that if they didn't colonize Africa, their longtime nemesis, the British, or even worse, the Germans, would take over these lands anyway.
But even at the time, the propaganda of the civilizing mission was challenged. We see this from the Haitian Revolution of 1791 to 1804.
I don't understand. How could the civilizing mission ideology from the 1880s have been challenged by the Haitian Revolution that happened 80 years before?
It was a successful insurrection by self-liberated enslaved people against...
Does he think that veins of thought simply emerge and they don't develop over time? Like, one of the things you'll learn if you get a history education, Alex, is that one of the core tenets of history is change over time. People have ideas and they build on those ideas. They don't just manifest one day. You'd understand those things if you bothered to learn.
Well, that's because he doesn't want to learn. He just wants to project his ignorance and then pretend it's fact. But like I can explain to him is it a coincidence that scientific racism became the dominant view of European high society after the French and Haitian revolutions? Does this guy think it was just convenient that it just became popular after slaves proved themselves that they were able to run their own society and liberate themselves? Does he think that like this stuff is just detached from material reality?
Well, if you don't have the necessary knowledge base to put all those things together.
Against French colonial rule in Saint-Domingue. Its leaders demanded France apply the principles of its revolution to its colonized subjects.
Go.
This is something that as someone who has watched a lot of his videos, you can see the same exact books arrayed on his table in each episode.
I could respect if he actually used them as props by switching out the books to be relevant to the time. And there's nothing particularly wrong with having a big bookshelf. That's obviously a point of pride for many of us here, Go Squids. But I don't necessarily think he's read those particular books. Like, nothing he has described here is stuff you can't get off of Wikipedia.
He's obviously not well read. He has absolutely no training in the historical discipline, in historical methodology. That's very evident.
And there are so many history channels that do that and are incredibly successful. So help us out and subscribe, folks, because
we need it.
This is tricky. Let's go.
It all started when mulattoes wanted to be granted the same rights as whites, especially inheritance rights. But that didn't work. Their white half-siblings were like, move along. So the mulattoes went to the plantations and they said, what up, homie, we're black too. Let's take down these evil white mofos. The white plantation owners were now shaken. They were literally in the middle of
It's not how that happened.
Yeah, that doesn't even sound like a remotely accurate description of...
It's not. It's complicated.
Yes, there's no
Yeah,
part
the
of this.
mixed race
There's no
is
part of
not-
this entire conversation that he's having with himself that isn't horribly
What up,
racist.
homies?
I'm gonna mention the fact that like the mixed race like free people of color comprise most of the Haitian like most of the militiamen, and and they actually shot bullets at the
are
big
a
whites.
class, an
Yes.
elitist class into themselves, and they later on replace the
Whites.
yeah, they replace them.
It's a
They're a
classic
product.
Animal
They're a
Farm story.
literal product of that system. That is why
Apartheid slavery.
he doesn't understand the big picture. He misses the big picture here. That all of this is part of one overarching system, economically exploitative and terror-inducing system. So he literally sort of glosses that over. That's the point of this. I mean, like his whole video. That's he doesn't understand the big picture.
All right, let us try to finish this before I lose my mind.
Furnace. So in 1793 they called for help. British troops disembarked and with the help of the Spanish army took over Saint-Domingue. And this is when the French Republic quickly abolished slavery because they needed an army. So now all slaves were free to fight for the Republic. And then this guy called Sontenax did an Uber delivery of 20,000 rifles to the former slaves. In the end, by 1797, this allowed General Toussaint Louverture and his troops to kick out the British and Spanish forces from Saint-Domingue. Now the mulattoes were like, we're the bosses now, you Namibians go back to work. Only problem, these former slaves were heavily armed and had military experience. Boom! Civil War. And then Napoleon's army came right into this bee's nest. They actually managed to win battles and take over the colony, but tropical disease decimated their army and Haiti became independent. My God!
Yes, that was also a wrong explanation.
He's ignoring the shifting web of alliances, the intrigue.
Yeah,
all the, like,
it's almost like
competition.
colonialism is a complicated subject that you cannot possibly adequately explain in 26 minutes.
Even like C.R.L. Thomas, the guy who wrote like the history, like he wrote like a Marxist history of the Haitian Revolution, even he struggled to keep all these competing interests and like groups together in a comprehensive history because there was just so much that just changed and flowed over a long period of time. I don't know how you could comprehend and summarize that within just.
Well, here's the
3
thing.
months.
I think the only experience he actually has with this is playing the Assassin's Creed DLC for Black Flag that covers the Haitian Revolution. That's the only possible explanation. Because that's entirely too simple for what happened, and that would be kind of.
I have to.
Yes.
Depart just for a moment. Okay.
Yes, I am stalling. Yes, so that's kind of the point of Freedom Cry. It was a very stupid retelling of the Haitian Revolution.
Like the reason why the Haitian Revolution started to begin with, it started initially because it was led by a man, I forgot his name, I think his name was Jacques Bourgolet. He was a free mixed race a person of color. He was a plantation owner, and he led the spark to the Haitian Revolution in 1790 when he led a militia of fellow free people of color to try and take over the Haitian government, because when he heard the French Republic deemed black people equal and should have the right to vote, he launched an uprising against the big whites, who then called in the French military to come in and quash it. And that was the catalyst that would go on to spark the Haitian Revolution, because the slaves saw that moment as the moment of weakness.
I don't know why. Yes, I don't. His book selection is just weird.
Like,
none of those texts are seminal. Here.
They're not
much more seminal.
stuff.
Much more seminal text in Keegan's History of Warfare. It's probably where he should start trying to unfuck himself.
Fuck himself. Or hold on. Let me find it. Or if he wants a good start history of the Haitian Revolution, then CLR James Black Jacobins. That's his name. CLR Jacobins. That's a great book. about the Haitian Revolution from a Marxist perspective. It's
All right,
interesting.
Let's
That
wrap
should be
this up.
a starting point.
Let's finish this.
All right, let's suffer more.
Oh
I
no.
almost forgot. Haiti literally had this racist imperialist past. In 1805, they literally declared themselves an empire, where whites were not allowed to own any land, nothing. And then
French
they went on to
white.
conquer the Spanish
French
parts of the
whites were not allowed to own
committing
property.
massacre
Polish,
after
American, English
massacre.
whites could.
10% of the Dominican population was gone.
Yeah, I
This
was
is
just gonna
literally
say,
what we
isn't there
call
like a
colonial
connection
crimes.
between them
Then
and,
they left and they came
Oh,
back
yes.
and then
I
reoccupied
don't
the
know if it's
Spanish part from
Kajanowski or
1822 to
Kuczynski, I forget, I
1844,
don't know how to
trying to
pronounce his
suppress
name.
the local Spanish culture, replacing it with French, and forcing thousands to flee to other Spanish colonies. And it's not as if they reinstated slavery, but unpaid forced labor at gunpoint.
It's a natural consequence of the apartheid slavery system.
You know what I don't get about this? About his memes? It's not like anyone ever stated that the system that replaced French colonial rule in Haiti wasn't a bad thing. You know, no one's saying that, like, they overthrew the French and made a utopia.
Yes.
The results of what was implemented there have, from the French rule there, have
It's almost like when you do an
reverberated
imperialism, it affects the preceding history. It's almost like change over time is something that happens.
of course.
Hmm.
And no one here is arguing that, like,
No one is arguing the perfection of Haiti. They're arguing, though, that the French imperialism was bad, which is a fair point that you haven't really
That's just a
discussed
matter of
at any
fact.
length.
yeah.
So he
that's just
hasn't
a
said
matter of
he hasn't
fact.
turned around and said any of these things that are better than that anything the French did is necessarily better than what came after it. He's just trying to point out that history is messy as a counter argument. And I don't think anyone will deny that history is messy. They just wouldn't necessarily accept that this messiness allows for a justification of colonialism.
Thank you. It took the words out enough.
The French colonizing mission continued into the 20th century. France occupied Syria and Lebanon.
I find it extremely unsettling that they have the nerves to talk about the occupation of Lebanon and Syria as if these were independent nations, while completely ignoring the fact that these regions had been colonized
they
by the
were.
Ottoman
They
Empire
tried to
for
be
nearly
independent
400
nations, and then
years.
France fucking
The reason why
crushed
the French
them.
were also interested in Lebanon particularly dates back 1860. France had sent 6,000 soldiers to the Levant in order to protect Christian communities in the Middle East. In this case, Lebanese and Syrian Christians. Some call it the world's first humanitarian mission. In the end, they negotiated with the Ottomans for the creation of an autonomous Mount Lebanon district with a Christian majority and a Christian governor. The borders of the
So what?
Yeah.
Again,
Well, yeah, and the
this
consequence
doesn't.
of that is the Lebanese civil war,
Okay.
because it created a segregated society between Muslims and Christians. So as a consequence of that humanitarian relief effort,
It got worse.
It got worse. Like,
Of
France
course.
didn't go in there for good intentions. They went in there to dismantle and
Even if
conquer.
even if they went in there for good intentions, using this as an example doesn't.
Dissolve France.
No, it doesn't dissolve them of what they did in Haiti or Indochina, anywhere that they were present, in Algeria. So, it's like, okay, you do one good thing, the Germans throughout their history did a lot of good things.
Yeah. At any rate, let's we're almost through this, and then we can prepare for tomorrow's suffering.
This district is essentially at the root of the modern day Lebanon.
There's also the trauma of war. The Algerian War for Independence, 1954 to 1962. It's hugely significant in understanding contemporary French society. The war began when the newly formed FLN movement declared its aim was to restore a sovereign Algerian state. They used guerrilla warfare at home and also diplomacy abroad, particularly at the UN. France drafted some 2 million conscripts over the course of the war.
What they're not telling you is that Algeria was not any other French colony. It was legally part of France. The population of Algeria at the time was 9 million, of which 8 million were
Oh my
native Algerians
God in
and 1
heaven.
million European settlers with full French
Hold on, I have
citizenship.
numbers for
After
this.
World War II,
I have numbers. Is he going to make the argument that because Christians were a minority in Algeria, did they not held disproportionate power?
More to the point, the fact that you're saying that a colony is legally part of this the colonizer's nation does not necessarily invalidate its attempt to gain independence. I mean, what is an insurrection but a successful or an unsuccessful revolution? So, like, it was legally part of France, so was Vietnam, and they also gave the French a case of DMBM flu. So that's not a particularly compelling argument. You're only able to take and hold territory in a real politic sense if you can take and hold it. If you cannot maintain control of it, it doesn't matter what you say is your territory, which Russia is finding out to its utter ruin right now in Ukraine, as they can claim all of Ukraine if they want, but unless they're sitting on it, they don't hold it.
the Algerian nationalists were clear: either French citizenship and equal rights, or independence.
How about no?
And since they were told no, of course the war started in 1954 and then intensified.
Wait a second. Why does it warrant an of course? Like this rhetorical strategy is just distractingly bad. You need a better writer. If you're the writer, then you should probably go to school.
When France granted independence to Morocco and Tunisia, but not to Algeria.
The human cost of the war remains unknown. Particularly,
Yeah, that's what we call in international relations a dick move.
It
on the
also couldn't be
Algerian side.
because Algeria
The
had a
Algerian
significant
government claims
French
as many as
population.
1.5 million died. The war ended 130 years of colonial French rule in Algeria. Yet for the longest time, it was called a war without a name.
Now talking about this is like walking straight into quicksands, but independent estimates of the Algerian death during the war.
If you understood quicksand, you'd understand that it's mostly annoying and not actually a threat.
Range from 140,000 to 350,000. And let's just say that not all were caused by the French military. To further complicate the situation, as many Algerians fought in the ranks of the French army as in the...
Who said that? Who? There were Islamist terrorist groups. There were far-right French pro-settler groups. There were moderate Sunni rebel groups. They all killed people. Who says the French military is the only one who killed people? No one. No one. Where's your source? I want a source.
It's
Give
Wikipedia.
me source.
It's Wikipedia.
No, Wikipedia is better than this, man. Don't shit on Wikipedia. Even Wikipedia gets this shit right. He's just stupid.
Selectively chooses the parts of Wikipedia that he wants
Yes,
to
it's a selective. It's a selective reading of Wikipedia. It's the Spark
right.
Notes of Wikipedia.
use. Or it's the simple English Wikipedia.
The rebel forces opposing it.
In my case, Algerian history was actually covered
Can I
over
say
a
one
day,
thing?
more or less.
I'll make it quick, trust me. The number that he lists is considerable by any measure.
Yeah, it's almost like we're also reducing human suffering to numbers too, which is probably a bad choice.
Of course, you live in France. What did you expect?
Walking around the street and seeing people that you learned about much later were actually slave traders or colonialists or war crimes heroes is extremely distressing.
Oh no! I feel offended by all these statues of...
That's not an argument,
Okay,
son.
fuck you.
What?
Fuck you, you
But when you have
inconsiderate
statues of
asshole.
slave traders in Algiers, that's part of a cultural heritage.
There has never been a French.
Oh my God, we're hitting all the neo-Confederate. He'd fit right in with Cletus. So I was having a discussion with not a discussion. I was making fun of a neo-Confederate Twitter account. And so he picks this fight with another historian who was in the army and has gotten into military history about Cemetery Ridge at Gettysburg not being a hill. A ridge is a series of hills and a long, thin line. And he's trying to say, yeah, you don't know what a hill is, to someone who whips out, and if you've ever been around the army, you'll recognize this. He whips out the fist. You know, you got a hilltop, and then you got a ridge, and you got spurs. And it's a training aid. You use your fist as a geographic landmark training aid. He's whipping out all the neo-Confederate nonsense. No wonder he's stupid.
Apology for colonial crimes in Algeria. What would an apology actually mean?
I can tell you right away. Reparations. Cash. Plus. Do you see Vietnam demand reparations from France? No.
I don't know. Like, what does Vietnam's request have to do with any, or lack of request have to do with anything? More to the point, I'm now demanding an apology for having to watch this video.
I want
Because their
reparations
economy
for
is
watching this
booming.
video.
They don't need no cash. As a matter of fact, the Vietnamese are actually quite proud of this French heritage that they have.
To me, the first apology
They are?
would have to
Stop.
be.
They are?
Stop.
I
You
can't.
can use that same argument for, okay, they keep colonial buildings. They have influence, colonial French influence on their cooking. I'm actually pretty sure they don't teach French anymore in
No.
Vietnam, but in Algeria, they still do. Almost everybody's bilingual in French. And I actually, because I saw parallels, to like the current situation that Ukraine is in regarding the language issue. And I asked my Algerian friend, rather beautiful, she's a rather beautiful Algerian friend, shout out to her, why do they still teach French in Algeria? And it's like, you always want to understand your history. That's her explanation. You want to understand the language of who your enemy was, and it's a part of our history.
Yeah, a whole
The
lot
same
of
thing
these.
with-
A
yeah.
whole lot of these former colonies tend to have people who speak at least 3 languages, minimum.
Of course, it's normal.
Minimum.
Doesn't take
Like,
away from
only in the
fact-
United States is it incredibly rare to have
Yeah.
people who speak more than one language. And even then, in the United States, it's not that rare. You have a lot of people who are bilingual, but you have, as a matter of course, people who speak English because English is used for business and aviation and maritime and a whole host of economic functions. You have people
And
who speak a
French
local
too.
language. You have people who speak dialects. You have like this concept that like there's lasting repercussions of interaction that are going to not necessarily justify those interactions down the line.
And look at Algeria's neighbors too. It's a way that they can. Well, I mean, they communicate amongst each other with Arabic, but also, you have that additional ability.
Lingua franca.
Yeah,
That
Yeah.
lingua franca. Like that.
literally
On-
lingua
All right,
Let's keep
Avery's
going.
giving me a look, so let's get to the end
I
here.
have pulled the player.
Womp womp.
Recognize, and it will be very easy because we have archives. We're not talking about building a whole entire history. Unveiled the hidden past, highlight the hidden past, highlight the dead angle, and then at some point, I'm not an economist, but some type of economic reparation will have to be weighed.
All right. What did I?
Pretending that your recorded video is your recorded video response that you predicted the correct response is not in any way a win, son.
Tell
What?
you,
Or
of
the-
course.
It's like,
And
oh,
the
I
biggest-
watched the video, then I wrote a script about the video, and then I pretended that I had foresight because I'd watched the video prior to it. Congratulations. Let's finish this. Jesus Christ.
Irony of it all is that they live
Oh,
in
me.
France. If France has to pay reparations to African countries, France will have to raise taxes, which will be taken from their salaries. Anyway, that's all I have for you today.
Is that the argument you use against Germany paying reparations to Israel?
Oh, Jesus
Did you
Christ.
say that?
All right, that was horrible. Okay, so here is what is happening for the rest of the week as far as plans here. Tomorrow morning, a video is coming out where I have a discussion with a licensed clinical social worker about mental health and the importance of social workers in society. That'll be out at 6 Mountain Time. I will probably start advertising when I wake up. Everyone should check that out. Tomorrow evening, we are finishing What If Altist.
What if Altist? Oh my god.
And
That's mine are short.
that's going to be a permanent. That's going to be about as much toxicity as I can take this week. On Thursday, I will probably stream some of the new Warhammer 3 DLC because I can, and it's my show. And then we are proceeding apace on essay writing and recording. I think Hetman is working on his now too. So, with all of that, it is now getting late for everyone. I want to thank everybody for showing up. Please remember
Thank
to.
you, and I want to thank our esteemed guest as well.
Yes.
Very great observations.
Like the stream, subscribe to the channel. We are now, tonight was good. We are now 6 subscribers away from this month's goal.
Woo! It only cost us a brain aneurysm or two.
Yes.
I
All
think
right.
if we keep watching What If Altist and History Legends, one of us is gonna die. Not.
What are you talking about? I'm already dying.
Our brains are just gonna. It's gonna be something of the brain.
Yes, that is almost
already dying.
certainly what's
I
going to
don't
happen. At any rate, I am signing us off. Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening, everybody. Woo!
Take it easy, guys.
Okay, we are good. Have a night, son, guys.